Westmoreland Community Connections is a presentation of Citizens Fiber.
Welcome to Westmoreland Community Connections, a look at issues and happenings on Classic Hits 107.1 WHJB. Here now is your host, Jennifer Mealy, Chief Communications Officer and Managing Director of Evangelization of the Diocese of Greensburg.
Welcome to Westmoreland Community Connections on WHJB. I'm your host, Jennifer Mealy. Today we're talking about the changes at the Westmoreland Chamber of Commerce, one of the largest chambers of commerce in the region, and has been run for many, many years by a gentleman named Chad Amond. Chad's successor will be a gentleman named Dan DeBone, and together both individuals appeared at a Chamber of Commerce luncheon at Gianelli's 2 in mid-September. I had the opportunity to attend that luncheon and listen and learn about both of these gentlemen. First, I'd like to start by talking about Chad Amond, who is being honored by many organizations for his decade-long run as the head of the Westmoreland Chamber of Commerce, longtime president and CEO. At 46 years old, Chad Amond announced last summer that he was diagnosed with something called primary progressive aphasia. It's a rare form of dementia that eventually will take his ability to speak, write, read, and understand. And sadly, this ailment has no cure. Chad has been very brave in fighting this disease over the last year, which is one of the many reasons he is being honored by so many organizations, including his own Chamber of Commerce. Let's listen in.
I'm going to bring my boss up here, Chad Amond. Chad, could you please come up? Come on, buddy. First and foremost, and I wrote this down because I don't want to misspeak here. Chad, most importantly, I want to recognize my boss, an exceptional leader who has built one of the largest chambers of commerce in Westmoreland County, Mr. Chad Amond. Although I've only been with the chamber less than 2 months, Chad will always begin each and every event. He will always take that center stage due to his accomplishments, hard work, commitment, and continued efforts for the Westmoreland County Chamber of Commerce. Chad, thank you so much for everything you have done for everybody in this room. Thank you for everything you've done for Westmoreland County. And what has been nice is that we have been colleagues, but I think it's important that we can say that we're friends now. So I know you wanted to say something.
I always say I'm not drunk now. Well, I can't speak as well as I can, and disability insurance got last week, and I want to work as long as I can, and I want to volunteer for the chamber and all of you. I love all of you and stuff like that. He is the best friend. He is my boss.
That's not true. Okay, where was I? Chad, I can tell you that really since I started, I made a promise to you, and I made a promise to your wife that whatever it takes, whatever we're going to do, as long as you're willing and able, we're going to continue to keep you involved in the chamber. What Chad was trying to say is that because of his disability insurance and how that all works, he's going to be spending less and less time in the office. So, but you're going to continue to see him, I guarantee it.
Wonderful words about Chad by Dan DeBone, who is the new head of the Westmoreland Chamber of Commerce. A little bit about Dan. He started his career in the Port Authority of Allegheny County and worked in a variety of leadership positions within that organization, including operations, marketing, and communications. However, most of his professional career experience included government affairs, community outreach, stakeholder relationship building, and he was the senior government and community relations officer for well over a decade before being promoted to Director of External Relations in 2020. And in his new role, he will be working extremely closely with all of the key stakeholders throughout Westmoreland County now who have been involved and who want to continue to be involved in the Chamber of Commerce. He's really extremely proud about his accomplishments inside and outside the Port Authority position, which is, really what he calls a comprehensive transportation organization. And he worked on many bills that were approved by the legislature, providing a reliable source of funding for highways, roads, bridges, ports, aviation, and public transportation. So Dan earned a Bachelor of Science and Marketing degree in Business Administration from Robert Morris and a Master's degree in Organizational Leadership from Duquesne University. And he recently graduated from Leadership Pittsburgh, earned a certificate in Project Management from the University of Pittsburgh, and he holds a Pennsylvania real estate license through Berkshire Hathaway. Dan told us he lives in Murraysville with his wife Sherry of 27 years. And they've raised both of their children, their daughter Maria and their son Dominic. So here is Dan DeBone speaking at the Chamber of Commerce meeting in mid-September.
If you were at our last luncheon, Tricia Thomas, who unfortunately couldn't be here today, said, "Oh, you get an opportunity to listen to Dan's accent because he's such a yinzer, right? He's from Pittsburgh, and yeah, I'm from Pittsburgh, and you will definitely know, and within a couple minutes that you know that I'm from Pittsburgh, but I'm not a yinzer or a yinzer-nat." But it was funny. My mother came over in 1947 from Italy. And all my Italian relatives, my mother's maiden name was Coloizzo or Colezzo, and they all lived in Canonsburg. They all spoke Italian, but my mother, God rest her soul, she became the biggest yinzer. I can still hear her today. She would say, "You guys get your coats on, because it's going to be cold out there, so don't be going downtown without those coats." So I don't talk like that, but every once in a while you'll catch me saying "down." Or I think the other day I asked Joanne if she had lunch, and I said, "G?" And she said, "What?" I said, "Joanne, did you eat?" I said, "Did you eat?" And so my wife, being an English teacher, she corrects me all the time. And so I'm from Pittsburgh. I was born and raised in Scott Township and Bridgeville, a small little industrial town. And I grew up in a family-owned business, and the reason why I'm so protective of our hospitality staff, and I respect them, and I give great tips. I give great tips because I grew up in a family-owned business. My parents had a restaurant for 30 years. And my sister and I worked probably since we started to learn how to walk. We lived at my parents' bar. It was called Jim and Jerry's, originally called Dempster's. And my dad owned this with another gentleman who was kind of silent partner. So my mother did all the cooking and my dad was the bartender. And it was very difficult. And if anybody has worked in the hospitality business, or if you know somebody that's working in a hospitality business or owns a restaurant, it's a 7 days a week operation. And the majority of your money, at least my parents would try to make their money on alcohol. Even though that it was right outside the third largest glass factory in Bridgeville. I just remember waking up every morning, seeing my mother on one of those large calculator machines with the tape, and it was just dirty because every morning she would just sit there and calculate to see if we had enough money to make payroll. And I had these memories of, after church on Sundays at 7:30, we would go to clean the entire bar, and that's what I knew. I didn't think it was wrong, right? And and I remember sleeping in the office, and then going out late at night with my mother to make sure we had enough lettuce, to make sure we had enough supplies. And it was a tough business, but I could tell you one thing about that business, and my parents taught me two things. They taught me how to work, and they taught me how to treat and communicate with people, even if I'm a user, right? Work is something that we just knew, and this is something that I'm not afraid of. And, and I was talking about coming to the chamber. I work 7 days a week. It's not because you're being told to. It's because you want to. It's because you believe and you care about what you want to do. And that was the biggest reason why I decided to move from the Port Authority after 26 years. And I think my wife and a lot of other people said, how could you leave the Port Authority? You have great benefits. I think everybody knows the Port Authority has fantastic benefits. I left 8 weeks of vacation, but I used to get every year 8 weeks. 360 days in my sick bank, my pension and everything. But, the one thing was missing for me that I just felt like I wasn't being able to make an impact anymore. And so I get this call out of the blue from a headhunter. It was the nonprofit agency, and they talked to me about the job. And then she told me what the job was, and I said, wait a minute, that's Chad's gig. I knew Chad was over there. And then she told me a little bit about, what some of the issues that Chad is going through, but I really didn't comprehend it. I really didn't understand it that much. So I went through the interview process, and I can tell you it was probably the hardest interview process I ever went through, and then I realized why. Because they really wanted somebody to be able to try to feel the level of integrity, the level of work, the level of compassion that this gentleman has. And so I'm here. And sometimes, we can't always understand why things happen. And, my mother growing up, she used to tell me to tell you, everything happens for a reason. And I can't understand why, the situation that our leader is in. It's very difficult, but I like to continue to think that I'm here to continue to help Chad and help his family and help this chamber. So, that's important for me. Moving on, when I turned 16 in my parents' business, just going back a little bit, my parents really didn't have enough money to pay me. They couldn't make payroll. And I knew I always wanted to go to college. So my first job, believe it or not, I was Chuck E. Cheese. Anybody hear of Chuck E. Cheese? Yeah, it was the greatest gig. So I could tell you that my first job, I was a rat. Yeah, I was a rat, and I loved it, and they paid me well for it. And as a matter of fact, they had 4 of those cautions. I used to take the cautions out, and I used to do birthday parties. And what a kick! And I used to drive down with my mother. She had this yellow Chevette, little Chevy Chevette, those little Chevy Chevettes, and I used to have the hat on, the whole Chuck E. Cheese, and it was a blast. I made a lot of money doing that. So I was able to actually put myself through school, and then once I got out of school, I sold everything. I just loved to sell. I sold car phones. I sold education. I was working for ITT Technical Institute. I'd come into your house and you would tell me that your son just got a scholarship to Yale. I'm like, no, he doesn't want to go to Yale. Electronics is where he needs to be. Look around you. There's electronics everywhere. And so then I went and sold frozen food, frozen meat. I'm not going to mention the company because I still think they're out there. But it was so cheesy that I would tell you that how much do you think this is going to cost you a month for the most quality level of beef and meat you'd ever want? And I'd flip over a napkin, and they would be like, oh my gosh, that's incredible. I said, I just threw the refrigerator in for that too. These people, they would just eat it up, But then I fell in love. And of all places, I went to Myrtle Beach, and I used to go down with all my buddies each and every year, and I met a girl from Murraysville, right? And so I was the first of 10 of my buddies who fell in love, and I got married, and guess where I ended up living? Murraysville. I never heard of the place. As a matter of fact, when I was dating her, growing up in the South Hills, I drove through 2 tunnels, and then I get into Murraysville, and then I'm off to this back road, and there's horses and chickens and cows and cattle. I'm like, there is no way I'm going to date this girl. There is no way. Next thing you know, I'm like, I'll be on next weekend. But what was even better, I told Jason this. This is honest to God truth. Not only was I dating the girl of my dreams, but her father, he had this nice basement. He had these 2 big refrigerators, and they were full of imported beer. So I was dating the girl that I loved and drinking this imported beer every weekend. I mean, it was the best thing next to sliced bread, right?
You've been listening to Dan DeBone, the new head of the Westmoreland Chamber of Commerce, speaking at a luncheon in mid-September talking about his career and how he landed at the Westmoreland Chamber. I'm Jennifer Mealy, your host of Westmoreland Community Connections on WHJB, and we'll be right back.
This is Westmoreland Community Connections on Classic Hits 107.1 WHJB. If you have a suggestion for a topic, or if your nonprofit organization would like to be featured on this program, call us during regular business hours at 724-216-1200.
Westmoreland Community Connections is a presentation of Citizens Fiber.
Welcome back to Westmoreland Community Connections on WHJB. I'm your host, Jennifer Mealy. I had a wonderful opportunity to attend a Westmoreland Chamber of Commerce luncheon in mid-September, where we saw a wonderful tribute to Chad Amond, who has been president and CEO of the Westmoreland Chamber of Commerce for more than a decade, as he hands over the reins to the new executive director of the Westmoreland Chamber, Dan DeBone. These two gentlemen are still working as a team, working in tandem to promote commerce in Westmoreland County. I had the opportunity to attend this luncheon and, with their permission, record some of the comments there, and I think you'll really enjoy listening to more about Dan DeBone.
All right. So let's turn to some a little bit more serious business here, guys. What I did at the Port Authority, a couple challenging things that I was very active in was some of the legislation. I think you're aware the North Shore Connector project. There was that tunnel underneath the bridge that everybody hated. It was a $335 million project. It ballooned to $535 million project, and I was the guy who had to go sell it. Right? I was out. I don't think I saw my family for about 3 months. So I'm like, this is when, we had the problems with the stock markets, the whole economy, prices went up, and we had $60 million already invested in this project. So I was the guy who had to go sell this North Shore Connector project. There wasn't one legislator that would touch it, right? But it was amazing. Once we cut the ribbon, they all came out like, this is great, this is wonderful. But we were able to get that project done, for $535 million project, and to this day, it is proven to be very successful. But these are some of the things I've done. Act 44, it's a transportation bill. It's a 10-year bill. And I spent a lot of time in Harrisburg fighting for transportation dollars, not just for public transportation, but for roads and bridges. So I spent a lot of time doing that. So let's move on to some of the chamber things, guys. A couple things that Chad and I are working on. We need a new director of membership services. Unfortunately, we have seen our membership basically stall. We have seen a decline, not as the decline of we've seen many other chambers throughout Pennsylvania. If you do a survey, if you talk to the Pennsylvania Chamber, they're averaging around 22% decrease in their membership. The Westmoreland County Chamber of Commerce only suffered a decrease about 13%, which isn't bad. So that tells us that our members are loyal, right? And obviously love Chad. That's only two things that I could come up with. But we are in a process, and I'm hoping to bring somebody on within the next couple weeks. But I can tell you, it's a very competitive market. We're a nonprofit agency. When coming from a budget of a $435 million operating budget, I would ask the CEO that I need $300,000 to a new marketing campaign, no problem. But coming to a nonprofit and looking at a $200,000 of what we have in the bank, I get a little worried. I asked about the cake. I was like, did we bring that cake in, or how much are we paying for that cake? I mean, these are things that are starting to keep me up at night because we have to keep the chamber moving. And so bringing on the Director of Membership Services obviously is not going to be the magic bullet that's going to solve all of our problems. Chad and I really have some good discussions. As a matter of fact, we talk every morning. Sometimes it takes us 5 minutes, sometimes it takes us 2 hours. But we talked about taking a look at what our events are going to look like. Our networking events, Chad, I think it was 128 events you had in 2019, am I correct? Okay, our events are fantastic. The bashes are fantastic. Networking is great. But what else can we do as a chamber to provide additional educational events? As a matter of fact, I don't know if anybody's here from Excel Health. Chad and I are talking with Excel Health to initiate a 3-event series program for employers. Some of the key topics, believe it or not, and we're getting these questions: medical marijuana in the workplace, Americans with disabilities, and how they accommodate in some of those issues. Because in the workforce, We just broke a ribbon, cut a ribbon with Achieva. There's so many of these individuals that are high-functioning individuals that they need jobs. And they should have no reason going into work and doing some of these tasks. So, Americans with disabilities. And then, of course, COVID. We're getting a lot of employers asking a little bit more other than what they see on the CDC or through the health department. So we want to initiate and bring more value to the chamber. So when you have an opportunity to write that check each year, I want you to realize and think of obviously everything we have done today, but what else can we do? Okay? Another thing that we're looking into is our legislative footprint. Okay? Not because I've spent so many years in Harrisburg and DC and working with our local officials, but what a great opportunity. We have Representative Nelson, Commissioner Doug Chu, and we have all of our legislators who basically are there. They're fighting for dollars. They represent Westmoreland County. They're trying to get the money for us. We want to be able to work closer with them to understand exactly what those needs are throughout Westmoreland County. And Westmoreland County, let's face it, I mean, we have some serious issues right now. We have a decrease in population. We have more people leaving us through natural deaths, and there's less births that are happening in Westmoreland County. And we know that working with Jason Ragone and working with many other organizations, there's a comprehensive plan reimagining Westmoreland County. I read it. I think I read it 4 times. I believe it. I think it's great, but it's not going to happen overnight. But all of us need to be on the same page. And if all of us are telling the same story, all of us are talking about pieces of legislation, all of us are asking our congressional staff, our congressional members for earmarks, there's money out there. But we all need to be on the same page. We all need to be making sure that if Jason's out and he's trying to sell the Lower Highlands Transportation Improvement Project, we know there's a gap in money. It's an important project. It's about reducing congestion. It's about increasing the economy, right? All those things as pieces together, but the chamber needs to be involved. I'm not saying that we're going to go out there and take a political position. For example, I'm not going to touch voting rights. But if there's something we can talk about the economy. Chad and I just recently testified at the State House Transportation Committee on redistricting. That's a concern. We know that that's coming. And because our population has decreased and we've seen other communities around us increase in their population, that's concerning.
Yeah, 17 school districts.
Yeah, Chad wanted to point out even our school districts, in terms of the enrollment, is starting to decline. In 1980, Chad's mentioning that we had 69,000 students. Right now, we're down to 44,000. And I think it was Jeanette High School had 38 graduates. So, yeah, so, it's a problem. But I'm confident, and I'm going to say this, and I'm going to suck up again. When I tell you I'm going to suck up. I'm confident that our leaders will continue to fight for us, and I've seen them. I've seen them in Harrisburg. I've seen them in the communities. They're out and about, and they're constantly trying to fight for Westmoreland County. We have a couple other things that are coming up. We have the infrastructure bill. I'm sure you've heard about that, right? It's, I don't think it's going to be a $3.5 billion infrastructure bill, even though the House passed it, and the majority of them are Democrats, and I'm not saying anything against Democrats or Republicans, but it's not going to be a $3.5 trillion bill. It will be, and it will happen. But when that money hits Pennsylvania, we want to make sure that we get our piece of the pie, and where and how those projects will be moved and how they'll be directed. All of us should be on the same page. I don't know if you realize that Westmoreland County, just in state and Act 44, and we know that bill is going to be expiring next June. Act 44 is the $450 million turnpike payments that are going to PennDOT that supports not just public transportation, but highways, bridges. There's somebody from the Port of Pittsburgh here. Where's he at? Right there, that gentleman right there. Amtrak. Without that dedicated funding, our roads and bridges and infrastructure are going to continue to fail. I don't know if you realize that 78 bridges just in Westmoreland County are in poor condition. Westmoreland County has the most roads and most miles of highways that a lot of people don't realize. And so when I talk about getting together, I talk about telling our story. Even though that you get in front of the right people, you get our groups together, you continue to tell your story, the more it will resonate. The last thing I want to mention about the Chamber is that we're looking at a marketing assessment plan. The Chamber has done a fantastic job, but our workforce has changed. Our businesses are changed. There's a lot of things that are different out there. And so I'm working with our board and working with our executive board to initiate some level of marketing efforts that we can begin to focus on our current members to understand what their needs are while focusing on potential new members. And it's very difficult when you have a very small budget. But I've made that promise to see what we can do to make those changes. And obviously they're not going to happen overnight.
That was Dan DeBone speaking at a Chamber of Commerce luncheon in mid-September at Gianelli's 2 along Route 30 in Greensburg. Dan did a great job introducing himself to the community as the new executive director of the Chamber of Commerce, and also did a great job honoring Chad Amond, the president and CEO of the Chamber for the last 10 years. These two gentlemen working together, working in tandem to move Westmoreland County forward. So glad you had the opportunity to get to know him on this show. You're listening to Westmoreland Community Connections on WHJB. I'm your host, Jennifer Maley, and I hope you'll join us again soon.
This has been Westmoreland Community Connections, a look at issues and happenings in and around Westmoreland County. Join us again next week on Classic Hits 107.1 WHJB.
Westmoreland Community Connections is a presentation of Citizens Fiber.